It's absolutely unbelievable. The United Nations compound with all its inviolability, with all its privilege and immunity. And despite that, they enter into the compound, destroying the compound. It's an extraordinary, flagrant, defiant violation of international law.
Joining us today on Center Stage is Philippe Lazzarini, Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees. Since October 2023, UNRWA has faced attacks by Israel's government, funding cuts from the US, and legal cases questioning the organization's neutrality. During that time, Israeli forces have killed more than 380 UNRWA staff in Gaza. In this episode, Lazzarini discusses Israel's ban on UNRWA, what dismantling the agency would mean for Palestinian refugees, and why he thinks it will have a chilling impact on international law. Philippe Lazzarini, welcome to Center Stage.
Thank you for having me.
A year ago, you issued a warning that the banning of UNRWA by Israel is going to be catastrophic for the Palestinian people, specifically in Gaza. Where are we today?
So the ban is still in place. It has constrained our ability to bring assistance and relief in Gaza. But the ban per se has not prevented the agency to continue to provide critical services such as primary health care, public health, or even resuming some learning and education for the children in Gaza, activity we have restarted when the ceasefire has been put in place.
And correct me if I'm wrong, there's about 12,000 staff, UNRWA staff, that are still operating in Gaza.
We still have 12,000 staff operating in Gaza. Before the war, there were more than 13,000, but as you know, 380 of our staff have been killed, and few hundred also had to leave Gaza and went to Egypt in 2024.
The ones that are still operating, what kind of conditions are they operating under? Do they have any kind of protection?
They're also struggling every day to cover their basic needs, but despite that, they remain committed to the population. You might remember before the ceasefire, we had the deepening hunger in Gaza, this man-made famine, and our staff basically was suffering like anyone else. We had people at work in our health center who suddenly had also to faint. So I would say today, our 12,000 staff who plays a critical role for the population in Gaza are sharing their daily struggle.
We are speaking a few months into the beginning of this ceasefire, which was signed in October, agreed upon, and we're now in the second phase of it. Part of that was meant to be a promise to open and unlock all international aid into Gaza that included medical supplies, that included materials, humanitarian assistance. Has that come to fruition?
It has not come to fruition the way anyone would have expected. During the first phase, it's a good thing that all the hostages and bodies have been retrieved and sent back to Israel. But when it comes to the assistance, beside having more food available in Gaza, very little else has come in based on what's really needed in Gaza. So we are still struggling. We had the winter, for example. It was very cold. The shelters were totally inadapted. When it comes to non-food items, when it comes to reconstruction or rehabilitation material, very little has entered into Gaza. So I would say beside basic food, every day looks like a miserable day, and it's a struggle for survival for the people there.
And also the attacks against Palestinians by Israeli forces haven't stopped since October. There's been hundreds of people that have been killed since the implementation of the ceasefire. Can we really describe this as a ceasefire?
Well, it's a ceasefire by name only. Since the ceasefire, nearly 600 people have been killed. Even this week, we had an UNRWA staff who has been killed. So I would say despite the ceasefire, people in Gaza continue to fear to be killed either by bombardments or by snipers.
And of course, UNRWA doesn't only operate in Gaza, it works in Jerusalem and the West Bank. In December, that Knesset bill passed allowing the Israeli government to seize UNRWA's assets. And just a couple of weeks after that, we saw the demolition of part of that headquarters building in Jerusalem. What did you make of that?
I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. We have seen this scene of the authority of Jerusalem, together with the police, together with the minister of the government, together with lawmaker, storming the compound. I just remind that this is a United Nations compound with all its inviolability, with all its privilege and immunity. And despite that, they entered into the compound. They were almost disputing to find out who should take the credit for destroying the compound. And as you know, a few days later, it has been set on fire. The symbolic behind it is we just want to annihilate any trace of UNRWA presence in East Jerusalem, which is also a way to get rid of the Palestinian refugee identity and memory in East Jerusalem. But beyond that, it's an extraordinary, flagrant, defiant violation of international law. And if we tolerate this to happen in East Jerusalem, it might happen to any other UN agencies or international organization, or possibly even a diplomatic mission. If we tolerate this in Jerusalem with more than 68 conflicts across the world, this could also happen anywhere else in the world. Look at what happened only in Gaza and the trend. We have now 37 international NGOs are not allowed to go to Gaza. So once you have created a precedent, others will follow.
And tell me about the West Bank, because it hasn't gotten as much attention as what has been happening in Gaza. And there are a lot of work that UNRWA staff have been doing in Palestinian refugee camps in the West Bank. Are they able to still continue to do that work?
First, it is true that not enough attention is being brought to the West Bank. It's a kind of silence war taking place in the shadow of Gaza. There have been an acceleration of a settlement expansion. The settler violence has gone unabated in total impunity. And we have also heard this week the government also adopting a new set of measures, which is also accelerating the quasi-de facto annexation of the West Bank. In this context, and despite the violence, and despite the fact that we have also observed the largest displacement of Palestinians since 1967 following security operation in northern West Bank, in Tulkarem, in Jenin, UNRWA continue to operate its school. We have nearly 40,000 kids in our primary and secondary schools. We continue to operate our health centers across the West Bank, and we are also active in providing social safety net to the poorest among the Palestinian refugees.
The antagonism between Israel and Israel's government and UNRWA goes back many years. In 2017, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that UNRWA needed to be dismantled, and he didn't see a reason for it to exist outside of the UNHCR, the High Commission for Refugees. Why do you think the role of UNRWA is so important?
Well, first, UNRWA is here to provide human development services to one of the most destitute population across the region, being the Palestinian refugees. Secondly, UNRWA is supposed to be a temporary organization, but it has been a temporary which has lasted for more than 75 years, only because for the last 75 years there haven't been any lasting and fair political solution for the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. Now, it is true that politically there have always been detractors who wanted the agency to disappear, because through its disappearance, that means solving once for all the refugee statute, and through this also the issue which needs to be addressed politically of the right of return. But this is definitely a shortcut, because even if the agency would not be in a position to provide its services, the statute of the refugee will remain. To change the statute, you need a lasting political solution.
Over the last 2 years, you and your organization have had to defend themselves against accusations, repeated accusations by the Israeli government that UNRWA is collaborating with Hamas in Gaza, that it is not a neutral organization, that some of its schools are providing propaganda material to the children that are seeking education there. How do you fight back against those accusations? Do you feel like your argument against them has been heard?
There have been a fierce disinformation campaign, there is absolutely no doubt. Now, it is true that when October 7 happened, a member of the government of Israel have said Hamas is Gaza, Gaza is Hamas, UNRWA is Gaza, so UNRWA is Hamas. And UNRWA became an objective of the war. We have always been extremely clear. We do not operate in a no-risk environment, but we have a zero-tolerance policy. So whenever we had material to investigate, we have investigated, but over the last 2 years, we had multiple allegations, which never went beyond the allegation, without providing any substantiated information which would allow the agency to act and to investigate, despite multiple requests at every level, and not only with the government of Israel, but even with the country who might have this privileged information that apparently no one really have.
And you mentioned the 380 UNRWA staff that have been killed in Gaza, and those accusations from Israeli officials have been used to justify their killing.
Oh, this is total nonsense. You cannot kill 380 humanitarian workers. In total, there were more than 500 if you take into account also humanitarian workers of other international NGOs or humanitarian organizations. But look at the media also. More than 200 journalists have been silenced and killed in Gaza. They have not been killed because they are agents of Hamas. And I think one of the reasons behind this also is to silence voices. Why are we 2 years after the beginning of the war still in a situation where independent international media cannot go in Gaza to report independently or to report in supporting our colleagues on the ground who have done an absolutely heroic job so far?
I want you to help us really humanize who some of these people are. Oftentimes, numbers get thrown around and they're hard for people to connect to. Is there anyone specifically that really stays with you? Somebody that you met when you were in Gaza that has been killed as a result of their work as part of UNRWA?
I mean, our staff are the teacher, are the nurses, are doctors, are members of the community who have a family like you and I, who are just dedicating their life, hoping a better future for their children or grandchildren. They are hard workers, very well integrated in their communities. I was the first time in Rafah weeks after a total sealing of Gaza, visiting a school. And this school was hosting already thousands of displaced people. They were living in angst. They were dispossessed of everything. And I had this little girl coming to me, begging for a sip of water, for a piece of bread, empty eyes, telling me that this is her school, a place where she used to teach and play, and today it's a place where she is begging for a sip of water. This is something which has ghosted me until now.
And your organization has been disproportionately tasked with taking care and feeding millions of Palestinians since 1949 when it was established. And when you face the kinds of challenges that you're facing today, the kinds of existential challenges to your organization, how do you carry that weight? What do you tell yourself when you put on your suit to kind of go out and try and fight for this organization's existence?
Well, I realize that the people in Gaza do not have the platform to voice their voices. And as a Commissioner General having access to all this platform, I will continue to do this on their behalf. And this gives me the determination and the motivation, because their story needs to be told. I know how critical the agency has been in the life of the Palestinian in Gaza, in the occupied Palestinian territory and across the region. And my message is really to say, don't give into all this effort to dismantle the agency. We have to focus on the people and the right to human development, the right to access to education and primary health. Education is the only asset which has never ever been taken away from the Palestinian. A house has been taken away, land has been taken away, but education has been their pride and the key for a better future. So keep the space for UNRWA to continue to operate until the day we have a proper alternative. And the proper alternative is nothing else than proper functioning, empowered Palestinian institution. And that's where our focus should be today. We need to be genuinely committed to address this conflict.
Part of this ceasefire agreement is the U.S. stepping in and really taking an administrative role in the future of Gaza under this Board of Peace, which Donald Trump is the chairman of. They have appointed a Palestinian technocratic committee. Are you coordinating with them on the ground? Is there a communication line between you and this Board of Peace?
We're in contact with a member of the technical committee who will be in charge of the day-to-day services to the population. There is no doubt, by the way, that the future of Gaza has to belong to the Gazan, and the Gazan has to be part of designing their own future, and still Gaza has to be and should be part of a future state of Palestine.
What do you make of the Board of Peace?
When the resolution has been adopted in November, I do believe it was a dark day for the multilateralism, because somehow we were confronted with a situation where the Security Council handed over its prerogative to a board, to an entity which at that time was not defined. So that's a precedent, and we have seen that with this precedent, it has triggered ambition which might go beyond the resolution 2803. Now I really hope that this will remain focused on Gaza, and that ultimately the Board of Peace promotes a lasting but also fair solution. Today we have no idea which direction it will take. We have heard the most dystopian possible vision. I would say that this looks more of a future for the Palestinian refugee, for the Palestinian in general in Gaza, than the one of the Riviera.
Do you feel that the role that the United Nations has played in the Palestine-Israel conflict has been sidelined as a result of the Trump administration's attacks on UNRWA, it's the cutting of funding, it's the implementation of the Board of Peace? Does the UN still play the role that it used to play?
You know, I keep saying never deal with Gaza in isolation, never deal with UNRWA in isolation. What we will tolerate with UNRWA or tolerate with Gaza will set a precedent. And the precedent for the time being is to make international law more and more irrelevant. It's almost violated in defiance openly. No one try to hide it anymore. So yes, I believe that there is a lot of danger. There is absolutely no doubt that the UN is under pressure now, not just the UNRWA, but the United Nations as a system. It is true that the system needs to reform, but it cannot reform. You will not reform the system by just creating a parallel mechanism. And there is a temptation, there is a danger, but fortunately, we are not yet there, and I do believe we can still prevent it.
Because obviously these organizations rely on funding from the international community. The United States has withdrawn more than $300 million worth of financing for UNRWA, which makes up almost a third of its total financing. Can UNRWA survive without it?
You know, in the broader scheme, $300 million is not a lot. When you think that the agency provides primary, secondary education and public health to millions of Palestinian refugees across the region. So I do believe that this region, together with the traditional donor in Europe, can cover the cost of the agency. My main message to anyone I meet today is don't throw the agency under the bus in the absence of a proper alternative. And the alternative is not a private solution, it's not an NGO. The alternative is a commitment to genuinely functioning Palestinian institution.
Back in 2024, many leaders around the world seemed to step back, reassess their relationship to UNRWA, reassess their funding to UNRWA. Are you worried that that might happen again?
In 2024, that was at the time there were the allegation that UNRWA staff might have participated to the horrible massacre of October 23. And it is true that once the information broke, within 48 hours, we had about 16 countries having taken the decision to freeze the contribution to the agency. Most of the donors at the time, or leaders, took this temporary decision because of domestic consideration, because the issue was so polarizing. As you know, the agency reacted very swiftly. Not only an investigation on each of the cases has been opened, but at the same time we have also commissioned the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, Catherine Colonna, to review, in fact, all the system of the organization to find out if yes or not they have been thrown. All these measures have allowed leaders to come back. And today there is only one country which hasn't come back, the United States. It's a major one. We have a second country which has phased out or frozen its contribution, which has been Sweden, an important one. But all the other countries are still supportive. Now, having said that, it is true that whenever there are elections in a donor country, I look at the election with a lot of anxiety, because depending on the outcome or the nature of the coalition which will be put in place, we will know whether yes or not the country will continue to support the agency. We have even seen that UNRWA and support to UNRWA has been part of some domestic electoral campaign. There have been countries where political parties have clearly indicated that if they win the election, the first thing they will do is to stop the funding to the agency, possibly move also their embassy to Jerusalem. So yes, we are very exposed also to domestic politics.
And finally, do you feel like the way that we think about international law today has changed?
I have been struck over the last 2 years how openly defiant Israel has been, how openly some politicians justify violation of international law. In the past, international law was violated, no doubt, but we always heard argument explaining why it was not, or what will be done to make sure that it won't be repeated. It seems that we have reached a kind of a breaking point today. No one feels the need anymore to justify it. And I think what we have seen in Jerusalem in our compound with a minister of the government and the lawmakers who was at the origin of the anti-UNRWA law jubilating while storming, destroying a compound which benefit the inviolability, privilege and immunities shows that we have reached a level which I would never have expected.
And what does that mean then for the way that we should think about going forward, what international law means, what the UN means, what an organization such as yours means?
Well, I mean, multilateralism or international law are instruments to regulate the relation between the states. And I truly believe that we cannot be in a situation where we have none of these instruments. What would it mean? Would it mean that we talk about a new era where the law of the jungle will prevail? But this is nothing else than the law of the most powerful. This is opening the door to an uncharted territory, bringing us back to the darkest moment of our common history. So I'm still confident that while international law and the UN are under assault, that a reformed UN will re-emerge. And even if we want to rethink international relations, we will certainly end up with what our predecessor have ended up with, being the existing international law instrument.
Philippe Lazzarini, we appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you for joining us today on Center Stage.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.